To hear your learnings from the business. Let's start with you, Emma. You started Enterprise Nation.
I did.
But when you were beginning, you started another business which you sold very fast.
I did, yeah. And I feel as if I should first of all say I'm really sorry that I'm the only person in the room who has wine. It's what's called speaker's privilege. So I've had a long day. I know you all will. So I kind of begged Marion for a little light refreshment when I came in. So I kind of feel bad. So excuse me that I will be sipping that through the hour. But yes, to go back to the question, I started my first business when I was 27. I had been working for a big accounting firm called Arthur Andersen, which some of you, you see, I love those little chortles that I get in the audience. For those, you actually don't look old enough to remember Arthur Andersen. I tend to get it from older looking people. So Arthur Andersen, the KPMG are happily smiling though at this point. For those of you that remember it, Arthur Andersen was a huge professional services organisation. So when I joined, they had 98,000 people. It was an amazing company. I was there for 5 years. You were taught you were the best. You were the biggest of the big five, you got fantastic training, you were sent all over the world. And of course, for those of you that know the story, it then sadly collapsed because of an accounting scandal with a firm called Enron. I had left just before Anderson's went down. So I started a first business in the year 2000. And I quite often tell this story, and in fact, it's funny that we're in the house of a media title, or many titles actually at the moment, even though I probably shouldn't mention the title that inspired me to start, but the Financial Times was covered with stories in the year 2000 of people starting .com businesses. And again, for those of you who were kind of in business at that time, it was really exhilarating and it was hugely exciting to see that people were raising loads of money, they were changing the way that industries worked. And what I'd been doing at Arthur Andersen is I'd set up for them an inward investment group. So I'd done law and Japanese at university. I'd started with the firm attracting Japanese companies into the UK, widened it out to say, right, let's set up an inward investment unit to attract companies from all over the world. And that's what we did. So I thought, right, if you can change industries and put them online, that's what I'm going to do for the inward investment world. So I left, started business with a business partner with my first business. And the story, and I'm really sorry if anyone's kind of ever heard me tell this story, but I just think it's kind of quite important in 2015 to mention it, that because it was the height of the dot-com boom, you were encouraged to go out and raise lots of money. And in fact, I know there's a first question behind us about how you raise 1.5 million for a startup, which I've got an immediate response to that, but let me tell this little tale first. I had gone to my partner at Anderson's and said, right, I want to start one of these .com companies. And he said, right, what you've got to do is you've got to raise loads of money. So he said, I'm going to take you to a corporate finance house and they're going to help you write a business plan. And this business plan, which I still have, very, very fat business plan, essentially said, we'd like to raise 3 million quid and we've got no idea how we're going to pay it back. And that was the thing in the .com times, is quite a lot of business reality went out of the window, that people just didn't know how they were going to earn, but they were raising lots of money. Anyway, fortunately, we didn't raise the cash because what we did, which is something I hugely believe in and have done for the past decade, is we went out and instead we got customers. So we went out, Arthur Andersen actually was one of our first clients. We had big corporate sponsors to start the business. And I'm sorry, because this is a really long way of saying, so we had this business, it was called Techlicate.com. We'd been going for 15 months and we had a call from a company which we thought was a hoax call, because the call went along the lines of, we've been watching you for 15 months, we are acquiring lots of businesses, we'd quite like to take a look at you. And my business partner got this call, and honest to goodness, he thought it was his best mate having a bit of a joke. So he said, oh, get lost, Johnny, to the finance director of a quoted company. So when we realised it was for real, the company was called Tenon, which again, for people who know the accounting industry, Tenon at the time, so this was back in 2002, they'd floated on AIM, they'd raised £80 million and they were acquiring lots of companies. So they came, I learned a huge amount kind of during that period. How to value a company is what I had to learn very quickly. The value of having a non-exec director, I learned really quickly. And so yeah, within 2 years we'd started, grown and then sold the business. And just a final learning from that, which maybe will kind of come through as the hour goes on, is once you've started your own business and then you go and work for somebody else, which I had to do an 18-month lock-in clause with Tenon, it becomes very difficult to go back to being an employee once you've been self-employed. So at the end of the 18 months, I left and started Enterprise Nation.
I totally agree. Michael, when we first met and we got introduced by the UK ambassador in Slovakia, There are few people in the world when you guys meet, and every time you meet these people, you are more and more impressed. Like for the first time, for the first maybe 3 times we talked, I didn't realize you co-founded Dirty Dancing on Stage. And I was more and more impressed with your entrepreneurial mind. How did it all start with you? You said you started at the university, right?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, thanks for the compliment. After, I've always been kind of a bricks and mortar kind of guy, and after university, I went into banking, I went into finance, I went into stockbroking. What I think I really, on reflection, enjoyed about that was the deal-making aspect of it, as opposed to sitting in front of a screen at the one desk all day. That wasn't for me. I was very much a people person, wanting to get out and do deals and make business. So I very quickly realized that I was an entrepreneurial person, and like Emma said, I was probably the world's worst employee and completely unemployable in the long term. So I realized very quickly I better get out and start my own business. So then, yes, I moved into property, and very quickly moving into property became entertainment property. So just like when you've got a hotel is part property, part hospitality. It's 2 businesses in one. Yeah. I moved into the business of entertainment arenas and theatres, which is part entertainment, part property business, and so started to build, develop, and manage entertainment arenas throughout the Asia Pacific region, which then in itself then moved on to a slightly more exciting business again, which was the entertainment content business. So producing shows, promoting shows, and you know, as you said with Dirty Dancing, that was basically, it was a solid business in the sense that we purchased the global IP rights to the show. Putting on a show itself just for its own sake and producing a show has never really interested me. You know, the audition process and that type of stuff. You know, and the pure creative process. It's always been the business context around it. You know, the business of creativity. And what I loved about Dirty Dancing was it was a global piece of IP, and it was an asset, but with the exciting and sexy and fun part of show business attached to it.
How do you get so lucky to just being able to negotiate a deal for an IP for such a strong brand?
I think, you know, I mean, everything, you know, a lot of people say, well, everything comes down to who you know. I think that relationships in business and relationships, integrity, credibility, you know, accounts for an enormous amount, which is always, of course, with a startup, it's always one of the challenges that they face as well. It's not that you lack credibility as a startup, it's just that no one yet knows you or what you're capable of. But, you know, I was fortunate that through the business with myself and the partners that I was in business with, you know, we were acquainted with people who were in a position ultimately to award the rights. And the rights to Dirty Dancing were owned by a film company called Lionsgate Films, which, you know, is the owner of other titles such as The Hunger Games and other big titles as well. And it just came down to a personal relationship with the chairman of that company, and of course we had to pay the right price as well.
Yeah, and it was a family business, right?
The business, we had some family partners, some non-family partners in that particular business, yes.
And what's also interesting, at least to me, is that your dad was part of a very famous band in the 60s and 70s.
They were famous in Australia, yes. He was a musician, and
All
all of my no one would know it here, but all of my family, with the exception of me, is very musically gifted. Unfortunately, that bypassed me completely and skipped a
Michael,
generation.
the reason why everybody is here tonight is to watch you do Dirty Dancing.
That's it, yeah.
So you better perform.
And then, maybe after a few wines we can try the dancing, but definitely not the singing. So yes, he was a very gifted performer, gifted pianist, gifted singer, and they had a very successful band in Australia.
And the IP was belonging to somebody before, like, so you bought it from the film company?
What had happened, yeah, the IP with the entertainment business, basically, you know, if you're a property developer, you're building a building, and your legacy ultimately, you can stand outside and look at this building, and that's your asset. With the entertainment business, the asset is literally a piece of paper. So Dirty Dancing, the rights were owned. The film company owned the name Dirty Dancing, and the author, the woman who actually wrote the movie, and it is a very iconic movie. The woman who wrote the movie owned the script. At the time when we came on the scene, as is common in show business when you know it's full of egos and hysteria and emotions. The woman who wrote the story and the film company had not been talking to each other, and they were involved in a Mexican standoff for 10 years. And then suddenly they realised, well, if a producer comes along and puts us together, and we're going to get a percentage of the gross revenue, we can kind of sidestep our differences because we're going to, you know, the money in the bank will help assuage the personal disagreements. So that's effectively what we did, and you know, just like a developer builds a building, you put the right pieces together, and then you put the creative team together, and then you create a show, and the show and its reputation then becomes the legacy in show business.
And when you create a show, is it something like a franchise? Because I don't know much about this kind of business. You create one show and then try to franchise it out to other shows, or how does it work?
What intrigues me, and this is, I think, once again, what's relevant to startups or to anyone in business, there's only so many business models in the world. I mean, there's a finite number of ways that you can exploit a business, whether it be property or tech or painting or fine art or entertainment, whatever it is, there's a finite number of ways. So the entertainment business is, you know, if you own an IP asset, it's effectively licensing or franchising. That's how you monetize it. So, you know, if you're putting on a show, some of the markets we kept and we produced them ourselves, which went, you know, like London, where we would capitalise it, you know, from our own pockets. Some markets we would get other investors, and some markets, like for example, all of Europe, we just simply licensed it off. It's a pure licensing deal. Somebody pays you an upfront amount, and they pay a royalty against the upfront amount, so they pay a certain amount upfront against a 12% royalty, and then they go off and they capitalise the show, and they fund it, and they run it. They consult with you, but you know, they effectively do the heavy lifting, which is the benefit. If you own, you know, a solid asset, then you can license it, and somebody does the heavy lifting.
Interesting. So any theater in the world can just come up and call up the company and ask for being part of it. If they have the consent from the company who owns the right and paying the royalties, they can use the show.
That's right. I mean, the key, once again, this is a business philosophy that applies against any business. You know, a brand. There is a huge strength in a brand. And you know, I was with some people this morning as well who just bought the rights to another major brand, and they're about to stage a huge musical of it, which I can't mention what it is. But what I'm sorry, no, after the big build up. But the point is that it's taken them, you know, to raise, you know, 30-40 million pounds. It's taken them about a week. Because the brand is so strong, and the same, you know. So if you have a strong brand in entertainment or in any business, you know, and you can demonstrate that the brand has integrity behind it, and people will trust that brand. They'll want to invest in it, and they'll want to partner with you on it.
Talking about numbers, can you share some numbers around about the show?
Fortunately, the show. I mean, I have done other businesses, but fortunately, this show, you know, which I've now exited from, you know, did particularly well. I mean, I don't want to sound arrogant quoting numbers, so you ask me what you like and I'll answer your question.
So I've read online that it's one of the top 5 fastest growing shows. It's one of the most popular shows ever, musical shows, which is movies. Any other
that is true. No, it is. It does hold the record as being one of the top 5 highest grossing entertainment shows. You know, you've got Phantom of the Opera and Mamma Mia and Les Mis. It is in the top 5. Globally in terms of its revenue. Absolutely, yeah.
And then you decided to exit the show?
Yes.
And do other things?
I did. I came to London 6 years ago, and then I met this woman on a bus. Yeah. We were on a bus, which happened to be the Startup Britain bus, not just any bus. I was going to say,
not like a London red bus, because that would just be weird. It
wasn't just a London red bus.
Yeah.
But at that point, you know, I was selling out of Dirty Dancing in the process of exiting that business. Yeah. And, you know, I'm totally passionate about entrepreneurialism, totally passionate about startups, about small businesses, and, you know, about contributing to that, you know, ecosystem, for the want of a better word. And, you know, I was fortunate that's where Emma and I first crossed paths, you know, and it was around the time when I was, you know, finalising my exit from Dirty Dancing back in 2011. You know, and then I was fortunate to get heavily involved in Startup Britain. But that was sort of the catalyst then for wanting to be very involved in the entrepreneurial ecosystem and working closely with entrepreneurs and helping entrepreneurs and small businesses grow.
So you met in roughly 2011? 2010?
We did. Oh, this is really feeling like a wedding now. First of all, we walked off as if it was the altar. We met in 2011. I remember the day exactly. No, I do actually. We were in Birmingham, and forgive me, anyone who's from Birmingham. But we'd taken, so by which time Startup Britain had launched, which again, for those of you that don't know it, Startup Britain launched in 2011 as, in my mind, a 3-year campaign to increase the startup rate in the UK. And we thought what would be a good thing to do is take a great big bus around Britain, which buses are so bloody old hat now. Everybody's doing a bus. But 2011, kind of, there weren't that many people doing buses. So we took a big branded bus to lots of different locations, and Birmingham was one of them. So we were parked up on a drizzly day in, again, for anyone who knows Birmingham, Victoria Square, outside the town hall. And this person turns up who I think looks like he's in show business. So he's like, white teeth. And I say this, no, I say, look at that smile. It's like $1 million smile. And he turned up and I was like, who on earth is that? Because first of all, he was just kind of standing, watching from behind the scenes. Anyway, one of the co-founders of Startup Britain, called Raj, a guy who'd still runs a business called Internships, had suggested to Michael that he come see what Startup Britain was doing. And as Michael said, you kind of had a little bit of time on your hands. So Michael got involved.
I think Emma Jones's first words to me was, are you working at the moment? Which I honestly had to say no, actually.
Yeah, well, that's because I love people who aren't working. So if people aren't working, then hopefully that means they've got time to give. But good time to give in terms of mentoring and support, which was everything that we look for from Startup Britain. So yes, Michael was then involved. Startup Britain carried on, and the UK has got 500,000 startups each year, which is lovely.
And the bus tour is happening every year, or how does it work?
It is. So the bus tour happened for 3 years, 2011, 12, 13. It's doing again this year, not to get into too much detail, but Startup Britain was started by 8 co-founders. So I'm not going to go through who we were, but 8 of us, if you want to know the story, 8 of us had gone to go and meet a man called Lord Young, who, I don't know if anyone's come across him, an incredible, incredible man in Britain. He was in Maggie Thatcher's government. He's 84 years old, still more active than I am, actually. And we'd gone to see him because he had been the Prime Minister's advisor on enterprise. So he was sitting in at number 10, and then he gave an interview to a Telegraph journalist. Boo, we don't like Telegraph in here. And he said to the Telegraph journalist, at the height of the recession, he said, people in Britain have never had it so good, which is kind of not what you meant to say. So he had to leave number 10 and resign his position. So 8 of us who still run businesses connected to small business went to see him and said, were you looking to do things in government that you can't do now because you're out of government, and can we take on the mantle of what you were looking to do? He then introduced us to a man called Steve Hilton, who you may have read a little bit about in the press, was head of strategy for the Prime Minister, has since been to California. He's a great thinker. And Steve Hilton met us and he said, right, so this was February 2011. And in the January of that year, America had launched Startup America. So Steve Hilton said, right, the 8 of you, we're just going to copy what America's just done. So go off and launch this thing called Startup Britain. And he said, I'm going to give you no money, but what I will give you is I'll give you the PM, the Chancellor, the Business Minister to launch it. So you're going to get all the media on the day that it launches. So we launched on 28th of March 2011 with the PM, with the Chancellor. Fantastic, well, kind of really interesting actually in terms of, so the 8 of us launched, we'd raised no money by this point, which was quite interesting. So we'd got this website, we got a whole load of people in a room, we'd got loads of offers from big companies, it was all in the media. And what's really interesting about social media and maybe kind of how you should develop a thick skin when starting a campaign, this is more a campaign, but I think it relates to a business as well, is that night, because it had kind of been everywhere, we were having people tweeting us, and forgive me, because I know this is being filmed, but this is what, so one person said, fuck off you cunts, what do you think you're doing? And I was like, oh my goodness, I've never met this person. You know, all we're trying to do is launch a campaign to do good things for people. This is like really vitriolic and really horrid. And so you very quickly develop a thick skin, and because this is the one thing in Britain, which hopefully we're kind of coming out of now, is if you try and do something good sometimes in Britain, and it's kind of high, I mean, clearly we were associated with a political party, which we were never associated with, but I think there was some political element in it, but people can try and shout you down. Whereas I do think one of the great things about the US is people push you up when you're trying to do something. Sometimes in Britain, people can shout us down. Anyway, with Startup Britain, we'd launched it. It was all over everywhere. People were swearing at us. And the next morning, and I don't think I've ever told this story actually, because I kind of feel as if it's over now, so I feel as if I can tell it. The 8 of us gathered in a hotel just off Trafalgar Square. And we were like, okay, incredible launch, expectations high in terms of what Startup Britain what on earth are we going to do now? So again, we hadn't got any money. So I stepped in to run the campaign, raised cash. So Startup Britain, when I ran it for the 3 years, 2011 to 2014, never took a penny of taxpayers' money. We took no government money at all. We raised all the money from the private sector, and we did lots of things. We opened pop-up shops, we did the bus, we did industry weeks, we met lots and lots and lots of startups. We did lots with the media. We launched a thing called the Startup Tracker, which was the thing that did track on the 13th of December 2013. First time ever the UK had hit 500,000 people who'd started a business in that previous 12 months. So kind of a very, very active campaign supported by government, which I don't know if we'll talk about the role of government in helping startups. What the government has got a brilliant role to do, I think, in Britain, is they can shine a media spotlight on things, and I think they're brilliant at doing that. When it comes to encouraging entrepreneurship and helping businesses thrive, that's when I think they should get out of the way. But what they're very good at doing is shining a spotlight on things when you want to launch it.
Yeah. Am I mentioning 500,000 startups, companies launched? How many of them are attributed to the campaign? Do you have any like precise KPIs?
So it's funny. One of our co-founders, who's a guy called Ollie Barrett, and again, forgive me because I don't know if anyone knows him. He's quite a modest man. So you've got me kind of running the campaign saying, right, 500,000 startups. We should absolutely say Startup Britain has been around. And he was like, Emma, we are not directly attributing all of those 500,000 startups to Startup Britain. But it was interesting because what I think Startup Britain did, and so we would never attribute at all that Startup Britain created 500,000 startups. But what I would like to think that we did is we came in at a window of time where people in Britain were thinking about starting a business. And it, dare I say, it kind of goes back to when I first started in the year 2000. And I said this on the day of the launch, the main thing that holds people back from starting a business in Britain, this was in 2011, is the fear of failure and lack of confidence. It's a very British thing. British people are kind of like, oh my goodness, if I start a business and it fails, that's going to be really embarrassing. And I'm going to have to tell my neighbours, and it's just a very embarrassing thing to do. Whereas, of course, the Americans, and I'm not going to refer again actually to American people, but what the Americans are brilliant at is they have no sense of embarrassment. They really don't. Have you? Is there an American person here tonight?
I've definitely been embarrassed many times in my life, but thank you.
No, you are amazing people, because I once sat in the lobby of a hotel in Washington and I thought, right, I'm going to try and suss out what these guys do that makes them so brilliant at entrepreneurship. So some guy comes up and there's a little Starbucks there and he starts immediately talking to the barista. We would never do that in Britain. It really disturbs us that they actually want to know our name in Starbucks in Britain. So this guy's like, hey Bob, how you doing? Great morning. And I'm like, okay, so first of all, just incredibly open to conversations, open to opportunities. Then this other guy comes, trips up in the lobby. Okay, so anyone in Britain who trips up, it would be like, oh my God, did anyone see that? That was really embarrassing. He was like, oh my God, that was the best trip I've done this week. And it's just like, you have no sense of embarrassment whatsoever. And that's what I think makes you great entrepreneurship, is you will trip, you'll fail, you will pick yourselves up again, and you'll just say, hey, that was just a great thing to learn from. And I do think Britain is getting much, much better at that.
This is true. And actually, last month, we hosted our keynote speaker was a head of state, our first ever head of state. And he is not from the US, but he was living there when he was starting. He was swiping floors in a petrol station and doing like a construction helper. And he said he learned the skill of if something doesn't go well, just never give up, keep going, keep working and keep doing it until you eventually succeed. So basically the idea of not having bad thoughts and not having low confidence, you just keep getting better. Yeah. And this is totally true for the US, and I think it's an attribute of not just the UK but all over Europe. We are not as good as believing in ourselves than we should have been.
But what helps with that, I think, and I think this is quite an interesting thing about startups in the UK at the moment, is having a co-founder. So businesses that I see that have co-founders, I don't know if you were kind of nodding for that reason then, is they tend to build confidence in each other. So when you have a bad day, you'll turn to your co-founder and say, oh, you know, why are we doing this? We can't raise the money, we can't get the clients, what's going wrong? Should we shut it? And of course your co-founder will say, no, we're not going to shut it, we're going to keep on going, we're going to keep on building, tomorrow it'll be fine. So what's quite interesting in the UK at the moment is hardly any businesses start with a sole founder. So there's a brilliant company that you may know of called Moo.com, which was started by a fantastic entrepreneur called Richard Moros.
Yeah, Moo is a partner for this event tonight.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay,
we hosted Richard
that sounded
last
like
year.
a sales plug. I just think they're a brilliant company, And he's really unusual that he is a sole founder who's grown that business across borders, most of their business now outside of the UK. And the thing that just mesmerises me about him is who does he turn to when he's having a shit day? And I still don't know. Maybe it's his mum. But I think that's how you can build the confidence.
You mentioned the bus, the startup bus. There's something similar in the US now called Rise of the Rest. And it's run by Steve Case, who is the co-founder of AOL. And the founder of Startup Grind is also on this bus every year. And what they do is they go to a less developed part of the US. And they visit several cities, and Steve Case has a competition in each city. And in each city, he leaves $100,000 to the winner of the competition, and as an investment. And this really helps. And you might have seen the US President Obama now speaking about entrepreneurship a bit more, because Steve Case is a good advisor of him, advising him on startups. Like they have also the idea of the startup bus. They call it Rise of the Rest. It's quite interesting. Did it work in the campaign, and are you aiming to do it every year?
So maybe just to mention, so I left Startup Britain, the campaign, in 2014 to go back into my business. First of all, again, maybe a thing there, never leave your business for 3 years. So always a dangerous thing to do. So I had to get back into business, and fortunately the business is growing and it's going really well. But we sold the assets of Startup Britain to a think tank called Centre for Entrepreneurs. They are doing the bus tour again this year. But as I say, I don't know, buses for me, I just think are kind of a little bit yesterday. That it's a great way to cover a country. It's a great way to take experts, advisors into new places. But I guess, I don't know, I feel that the landscape in the UK now is that startups are still at a good level. They're actually flattening out at the moment, so it's not on the incline. The number of startups is flattening out, which I think is absolutely right. And I guess what our attention has turned to at Enterprise Nation and the government and lots of other people we deal with is more now about how you help startups to grow. So we've kind of got this great mass, well, we've got 5 million small businesses operating in the UK. So I think rather than encouraging more people to start, I think now it's about making sure that those businesses get the right advice, that they get access to finance, and how they go about growing their company.
Michael, you exited the Dancing on Stage, and do you still like the entertainment industry for the business part, or do you still have one foot in the door, so to say?
I do. I mean, I love the entertainment business. I'm a shareholder and on the board of a entertainment company called Eclipse Entertainment, which is a film, TV and live production company. And I'm also the chairman of a big branding marketing agency in Britain called Transatlantic Entertainment, which interestingly has a lot of connections back into the tech space as well. We look after the branded content, which is a special part of marketing for Skype, for Bing Microsoft, for X Factor, Simon Cowell, and a lot of work with Victoria Beckham. So through directly and indirectly, I'm still very much involved in the entertainment business. I also, as I said before, I'm very focused on the business of creativity. And I know, particularly also, I mean, Emma can answer the question better, but I mean, in this country, there's a big focus on tech, which is extremely important. There's also many millions of businesses which are non-tech, and a lot of them are creative. If you look at the non-tech numbers, I mean, tech in itself is a creative, in my view, is a creative business. If you're sitting there coding, you are a creative person by nature, because you're literally creating something from nothing. But also, if you look at the numbers of other types of businesses, you're seeing an enormous number of arts businesses and crafts businesses and creative businesses in this country, especially. But whatever paradigm of the creative sector you're in, whether it be tech or art or craft or painting, there is often a disconnect between business and creativity. So you get a lot of creative people who are very focused on their specific core competency. So if you're a painter, or if you're doing arts and crafts, or if you're a coder, there's people who will be specifically focused on that, but they will not necessarily have the idea how to turn it into a business. So you'll get people perhaps who are doing arts and crafts or pottery as a hobby. They have no idea that they could be making a living. You get coders who will sit in at their living room table, coding themselves to death, making the best code, but never turning it into a business, until perhaps a co-founder comes along and says, hey, you're the creative guy, or the creative girl, we can actually turn this skill into a business. So there's often a disconnect. So I wrote a book called The Business of Creativity, which is a business book for creative and tech, for anybody from that creative paradigm who wants to look at commercializing their creativity. So, you know, once again, the thread that I very much focus on is helping entrepreneurs, and not just creative ones, but that's certainly a major focus, helping them turn their passion into a business, because the world, in my opinion, is missing out on many amazing entrepreneurs, many amazing business people, simply because it's just a different skill set. A lot of creative people think money's a dirty word. A lot of them just, even when they do go into business, they end up getting screwed over. Look at fashion designers. You know, fashion designers are renowned for getting screwed over. I don't know why, but the number of fashion designers normally name their business after themselves for whatever reason, and the number of fashion designers who end up losing control of their own name through an investor or getting screwed over by an investor or a partner. And a lot of that, in my opinion, can be avoided if you understand. You don't have to be an expert in business if you're a creative, but you at least have to understand it.
This is true.
Trying to help educate and communicate that is a big part of what I focus on.
We had last February Caprice, if you know the model Caprice. She appeared on maybe 250 covers of different magazines, and she was the first person in the UK who licensed out her name to, I think, Debenhams. And then she realized the fee she was getting each year for the brand, for her own name, was not big enough. So she, after a few years, she bought the brand and rights to her own name on the product's back.
Right.
And now she's running the business herself. So
that makes sense. And she's somebody who's been successful. So
who
no doubt had the knowledge, had educated herself, had the right advisors around her to be able to facilitate that, and good on her for doing that. But the problem is, for every one of them that can do that, there's many others who can't, who just don't understand that paradigm.
Yes.
So,
and the reason why we have the two of you together on stage is because you have interesting plans, right? And is it fair to say that you are kind of like co-founders for this new venture?
I think that is very fair to say.
Do you want to say what that new venture is?
Yes. So, the new venture, right. Right.
We're co-founders who never disagree with each other.
That's very apt with a Slovak host to be talking about what the new venture is. So the new venture is Enterprise Slovakia, which is a hybrid really between Startup Britain and Enterprise Nation, Emma's companies, and it basically, Central and Eastern Europe, which of course you're familiar with, and perhaps many people in the audience are. Central and Eastern Europe, in my view, and I was travelling there for the last 3 years doing all different types of businesses. Central and Eastern Europe, in my view, is a very innovative geographic region.
Yeah.
And as much as any country can be filled with natural entrepreneurs, I find that, without question, all of the countries that I've travelled to in Central and Eastern Europe, and I've been to all of them, are filled with naturally entrepreneurial, innovative people. Doesn't matter what the reason is. That's, I didn't invent the reason, but it's a fact in my opinion. So what I have noticed though is that the ecosystems simply aren't as mature as, these were communistic countries 25 years ago. The ecosystems aren't as mature perhaps as economies such as Britain or the US. Reverting back to what Emma said before about government, I think that when you're looking at an ecosystem, I think there's an ecosystem triangle to grow an ecosystem. I think you need government to shine a spotlight and then get out of the way. Yeah. I think you need corporates to support things and to sponsor things and to put their name behind stuff. And then you need, of course, the entrepreneurs. So these are the three things. And these are things which are late bloomers and late developers in Central and Eastern Europe. Slovakia, however, quite frankly, I live next door in Hampstead, live next door to the Slovak ambassador to Britain. And, he and I got talking and, we basically worked out a plan as to what's happening in Slovakia and how can we make Slovakia, the geographic enterprise entrepreneurial hub of Europe. How can we do that? And why can we do that? Well, why would we do that? Well, Slovakia, for everybody here who doesn't know or who's never been there or who confuses it with Slovenia, Slovakia, has just passed a series of laws over the past 4 to 6 weeks, which really put its entrepreneurial and startup laws at world's best practice. They modeled these laws on Singapore, on Britain, on Israel, and they've got all sorts of things from tax incentives to visa incentives, and the government has really done their job in trying to make this place a really...
Is your vision for enterprise Slovakia just staying in Slovakia, or do you aim to go to other countries with this?
I think that it's something that's quite possible to go to other countries. You know, at this point, the focus is very much on working with Slovakia, and we're working very closely with government. With the Ministry of Economy is very much supportive of, or is a partner, in fact, in our campaign, and a number of corporates, including HP, are supporting the campaign. So I think the focus very much now is working with Emma and with Enterprise Nation's skill set on delivering the first event, which is now going to be on the 1st of October.
Is it like a branch of Enterprise Nation?
Well, so what's the interesting thing for us in terms of why we got involved, and I guess our involvement is Michael hosted an event in Bratislava in April, which was fantastic, which it was filled with Slovakian entrepreneurs, and it was great. And I kind of went and saw this unleashing, I guess, of an entrepreneurial spirit in a country that I'd never visited before. And then Michael said he was talking to the ministry to kind of say, right, what more can we do? And I said, okay, count us in, because my interest from an Enterprise Nation perspective is increasingly we're seeing small British businesses want to export and go global. So British businesses who see an island of 60 million people, which is great, but then look beyond that island and say there's 1.2 billion consumers online. And kind of things that we do at Enterprise Nation, we're doing a second international trade mission this year. We're taking 40 businesses to China in October, which is going to be an eye-opener because, of course, that's just such a huge market. But Slovakia for us is we really want to see just more trade routes between the UK and Slovakia. And part of this also is around, all the negotiations in the EU at the moment. Do we stay in? Do we not stay in? I think for small businesses, trading with the EU is a great opportunity, but it's not one that's leverage that much because it's close to us, which is great, but I do think lots of British businesses would look to say, I want to go to the US or I want to go to Asia, and they wouldn't necessarily say, I'd love to go to Slovakia. So our job is to open up those opportunities, to educate small businesses in Britain, to say, look, this is the consumer market in Slovakia. Similarly to Slovak companies, this is the market here, and to make sure that those kind of links are made. So that was the thing that attracted us to working with Michael on the campaign.
And Michael, using you having knowledge from the show business industry, when you're starting as a startup or as a entrepreneur, how can people tap into the show business way of doing things? For example, can you just come up to some music superstar and ask them to be an ambassador for the brand, or how does this business work?
It's interesting you say that because I think it's a great question. Show business at its heart is, it's about even though it's a very solid, there is a big focus on dollars and cents. It's very much about fun. It's very much about glamour. It's very much about celebrities, obviously, and it's also very much about a brand, like we talked about before with Dirty Dancing. And I think that when you're a business, when you're trying to grow, when you're a startup, like we talked about before, when nobody knows you and you don't have any credibility simply because you haven't had a chance to prove to anybody who you are, when you have a brand and you're entering the business, the big bad world out there, thinking, I've got the best take, I'm going to do the best tech business in the world, I'm going to open the best cafe in the world. In your mind, it's very clear, but of course, to go out this door to 60 million people is a very different story. So how do you stand out from the crowd? And I think a lot of inspiration can be taken from the show business model, from focusing on the brand. In show business, it's called selling the sizzle as well as the sausage. Now, of course, in that analogy, the sausage is the business and having a business that actually does what it says it's going to do and that actually performs. The sizzle is the sex and the fun and the glamour and the brand around it. And a lot of entrepreneurs won't naturally think of that. And a lot of entrepreneurs that I speak to, I ask them what their marketing plan is, or what their public relations plan is, or what their branding plan is, and it's usually often zero. Well, because publicists cost money, and we can never get to this celebrity, and this is impossible, and that's impossible. Well, if you think it's impossible, so forget it. But what I always encourage people to do is that, marketing is at its core. If you look at the root word of marketing, I'm not a linguistics professor here, but if you look at the root word of marketing, it's market. So marketing is, by definition, taking your product to the market. But marketing in a show business profession is doing that in a sexy way, and doing that through celebrity endorsements and product placements, and through very much building up the equity of the brand. So, and it's really a mindset. What does that mean, building up the equity of the brand? It means being cognizant, being aware that as well as building the core business, whatever that core business is that you're doing, that you're also building the brand name, and getting that publicised. So it's a mindset. It's having that dual mindset, and that's what show business does at its best. And that's, I think, the greatest inspiration that entrepreneurs can take. And it doesn't mean you have to spend millions of pounds on publicists. It just means that you've got to have that mindset.
So just to add a couple of things to that. One is that when Michael put on this event in Slovakia in April, it is the only time where I've been sent speaker notes briefing where it said, at 2:13, Bruce Springsteen. So he had done music to come on with all the speakers. And I called him up, I was like, what are all these tracks? He's like, that's show business, baby, which I just loved. So show business and everything. But just a point, when Michael said kind of get a publicist, etc., a company who I've loved watching grow, actually, who I think has done showmanship massively on a budget in terms of spent nothing on it, is a brand called Jimmy's Iced Coffee. And I don't know if you've come across them. I love this guy, he's called Jim Cregan. He went to Australia actually, drank cold coffee, came home, couldn't find it here, and thought, hey, I'm going to launch a brand. It's a great product, but what Jim does superbly well is the very first time we invited him to speak, and he still does it now, he turns up in a coffee carton. So he arrives in this coffee carton, so everyone's like, who is the dude in the coffee carton? And of course it says on the front of the coffee carton, Jimmy's Iced Coffee, so everybody's taking a picture of him, tweeting it out, putting it on Instagram, Facebooking it. Who's the dude with the Jimmy's Iced Coffee? Well, it's Jim from Jimmy's Iced Coffee. And he is a showman. He's an entrepreneur and a showman, which he's done through wearing a costume. So it cost him maybe 50 quid. In fact, we've just got him his most recent one for free because he gets it from Morph Suits, which again is another beautiful business, which I don't know if you've looked at. And we've just connected up the two entrepreneurs to do a deal that the Morph Suits provide Jim with his Morph Suits now for free. But he does it superbly well. And without spending anything, he's created this great brand, which is now selling in Ocado, Waitrose, etc., etc. So it shows that it can work.
And he is the embodiment of his own brand.
Yeah.
Emma, you're
Literally.
You're working with many entrepreneurs. Do you think that entrepreneurs don't really tap into the power of the celebrity or the personal brand enough?
The personal brand in terms of their own brand or somebody else's?
Like using whatever they can use to build the brand faster?
What are you suggesting about? Using whatever they've got.
You said the coffee dude, right? So that's what I mean. So the coffee dude puts on an outfit.
Coffee dude puts on a coffee carton, what can everybody else do?
So,
well, there's a little thing in terms of like fashion and food entrepreneurs, which I always think if you sell a product or which is fashion, which is food, which is jewellery, wear it and carry it at all times. So I'm a huge believer in that.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure about this reaching out to celebrities bit. I'm always a little bit ambivalent about that. It worked really well for Michelle Mone, so the lady who did the bras. I don't know if you know her story, that she sent one of her bras to the girl who was doing the styling for the Erin Brockovich film. And for those girls and boys who watched Julia Roberts in the Erin Brockovich film, you will remember that her boobs were quite pert. Do you know, I'm not kidding, I will just sound terrible on this filming tonight. I have sworn, I've spoken about pert boobs, and it worked really well for her because her bras got noticed. That's what launched her line, so that's where it works. And I don't know what Michael's view on this is, the Ultimo brand, you clearly know it very well, Marion. What I don't know if Michael would agree, where I think you've got to be careful with celebrities is if you get them to endorse stuff and then they are found taking cocaine in a gutter, etc., and your brand is then associated with that. So there's that element of control.
Yeah.
But you as the entrepreneur, and this is, and I don't mean this to sound naff, but I think every entrepreneur is an absolute rock star at the moment, and everyone loves the entrepreneur. The press love entrepreneurs because you've all given up the day job to scarily kind of start a business, so they think you're the rock star. Big corporates definitely think you're the rock stars because they all want to be you. So everyone that's not you thinks you're a rock star. And the whole thing that I just think about brand, and we talk about this a lot at Enterprise Nation, is knowing your story. So knowing how you want to be perceived in the press. Richard Branson is the ultimate brand builder in the UK. He knows exactly how he wants to be perceived, and every single media message endorses how he wants to be seen, which is the one who takes industries and modernises them, and he's picking up girls, he's putting on makeup, he's taking us to the moon. Every single press story, every single picture of him, it's continuous, it's constant, it's the adventurer in industry. And because he's built that great story, that's a great brand. So I think the first step as an entrepreneur is knowing what is my story, how do I want to be perceived, and then relentlessly putting that to the press. And dare I say, you are literally in a building tonight where, this is really bad, are there any journalists here from News UK sitting in the audience? Come on. Are you? No, the lady, the lovely green jumper. Are you one? No, you keep on looking behind you. Are you a journalist? Are you really not? Because you looked really embarrassed about it then. All right. Are we in an office full of journalists without a single... Oh, well, it would have been a nice idea that if the Times, the Sun and Wall Street Journal, who I know are here, pitch your story to them tonight. You can't, because they're not here.
Yeah. Michael, you just came back from LA. And we talked about this show business element where lots of rock stars and music icons are now investing in different startups, entrepreneurs.
Yes.
We have they're even launching their own businesses, like Jay-Z is doing Tidal now. And is this a good route to kind of team up with them and use them as investors? Is it opening doors?
I think that there's a 50-50 answer to that question. Firstly, with regards to where Emma's coming from and the question she posed a second ago, I think, and also to your question, I think if you are teaming up with a celebrity, whether it be a mega star like a Jay-Z or a lower level celebrity, firstly, you do have to do that it has to be done with integrity, and that's not just making sure you don't pick a celebrity who's taking cocaine in the gutter. That's part of it, of course, but the second part of it is making sure that you pick a celebrity who is not just clearly obvious to the public, who are not stupid, that he or she is just doing it simply because they're being paid money to do it, but they have an obvious reason to do it. Yes. And Transatlantic Entertainment, the media agency that I'm the chairman of, and that is all that business does. That matches up, entertainment products and programs with brands, basically. And the whole purpose of that is to make sure that it is integrous from both sides. Second part of your question, I think, when you're looking at entrepreneurs, when you're looking at rock stars, literally rock stars, many of them want to be entrepreneurs. And I think that entrepreneurs, are perceived as the new rock star, like Emma said, as well. And so you're getting celebrities who are also wanting to take their own celebrity status one step further, and taking that and being a celebrity, being a megastar like Jay-Z is not enough. They want to be entrepreneurs. They want to be, they're creative people anyway. Yeah. They're creating music, so they're creative people anyway. So then they're wanting to create businesses as well. And what someone like Jay-Z is doing, is, I think, not only is it good because, you've got an example of a celebrity who's becoming an entrepreneur, but I think that also sends a strong message as well in general about entrepreneurialism to the broader world. Because Jay-Z's probably got 60 zillion Twitter followers, all of whom see, hey, this guy's starting a business. He's a singer. He might be a successful singer, but he knows bugger all about business. But he's starting a business, and that also in itself sends a strong message. And
that's a very good point. And I also agree with Emma that you have to be careful about the integrity of the rock star investing in you, but looking at it from their perspective, how do I convince Jay-Z or Madonna or Dr. Dre to invest in my company? What's the best way to reach out to them?
I think, one thing that is, firstly, we all know that in the age of Twitter and social media, everybody is literally contactable. Yeah. So we know that. But what we also know is that if you're a celebrity, whoever you are, however rich you might be, you are only as good as your brand. So, whoever, look at Madonna, her brand, her expertise is not just as a talented singer-songwriter, it's in reinventing her brand constantly. And it's in the face of Lady Gaga, another extremely successful artist, but one who has clearly modelled, unashamedly modelled herself on Madonna. Madonna has continually gone out and reinvented her own brand. So in itself, that is an interesting business statement, I think. But further to that, if you are a business and you want to do something with a celebrity, you have to look at what benefit is it to the celebrity. And this goes for business in general. I mean, it's true, if you look at what benefit is it for me to do something, then it's going to be like throwing a dart on a dartboard as to whether I'm going to find anyone that's going to want to do anything with me. If you're looking at it as to what's a benefit to the other person, so you look at the people who, like Justin Timberlake and many others who have invested in businesses, and who've tried to do things. What is the benefit to them and what's driving them? If you look at what's driving the celebrity and you look at what what they stand for and what they represent. Is it just money making? Is it just because they want to say, hey, I'm in business? Or is it a genuine desire to build a business? Or is it a genuine desire to build a particular type of business? And if so, then you can understand then how that might synergize with your company and your business.
Yeah. So is it safer to just reach out to them through the managers or go on Twitter and tweet
If
out?
you literally want to approach a celebrity, yes, I mean Twitter or a manager is the number one way. The manager reports directly to the artiste, as it's called in show business, artiste, and they report directly. They report directly to them. So that's the best way. And there's in show business only about 3 or 4 major managers who look after the top 50 artists in the world, and Google search will quickly reveal who they are.
Okay, so maybe we can have one of those 3 managers here on stage at some point.
That's our goal for
And
one of the
can I
fireside
just
chats.
mention a couple of other options, because again, I know it's a brilliant way to get your brand noticed, but I saw recently that Channel 4 are offering, in exchange for equity in new startups, they're offering free advertising on Channel 4, which I think is brilliant. And so it's great to see kind of deals like that in the market coming through. And again, just to bring it back to British entrepreneurs, who I think have done a great job on this, is Paul Linley, who started, successfully grew and sold Ella's Kitchen. If you ever get an opportunity to hear his story, please do, because it's superb in terms of literally from the kitchen table starting this company. But he had worked for Nickelodeon. And the deal he did at the very start, so he got no budget for advertising, but he knew he wanted to get a mass market brand very quickly into the supermarkets. So he went back to Nickelodeon, and fair enough, he knew them because he'd worked there. But he said, can we do a deal which is a revenue share on advertising? So will you advertise Ella's Kitchen products on Nickelodeon, and I will share with you the revenue that comes that's direct attribution from those adverts? And Nickelodeon said, yeah, absolutely, because we'll give you that airtime. We get revenue from it. It worked really well. So I do think deals like that are kind of really worth looking into, because it's just like if you're on a budget, and it goes back to what Michael said, think what's in it for the broadcaster, whoever it is that you're pitching to. But I think things like Channel 4 media titles opening up is brilliant for small businesses.
We had one speaker here in December, a founder of a company called Boozoo. Boozoo.com. They have like 45 to 50 million people who are learning languages online.
Nice.
And they won a 5 million grant of advertising on ProSieben in Germany. And they made this amazingly nice and well shot, which they used, and it didn't convert. Nothing came out of it. And they just, because they were panicking, didn't know what to do. They had this amount of advertising they were using, and nothing came out of it. They just made this quick shot, very cheap, with one guy telling people what Boozoo.com is and why they should join. And it was very cheaply done and done over the weekend, and it was converting way better.
Yeah.
And his learning was just, it must be a clear explanation of what it is and call to action.
And authentic. And I don't know if anyone's seen it on YouTube. What's the name of the shaving subscription company in the US?
$1 Million Shave Club?
Has anyone
Dollar
seen
Shave
his
Club,
video?
right? Yeah.
Go and watch his video. If you type into, so sorry if you all have, but because that's kind of done the rounds now, that $1 Million Shave Club, the founder, for $400 off a couple of phones, did a video, which I think it's been seen, I don't know, by millions and millions of people. And he says, again, it's converted hugely into his business. But I think that's the whole beauty of technology, is kind of putting a phone on a selfie stick now, and you become your own publisher.
Yeah.
And you just have access to all these people. So you could say, who needs Channel 4? But I do think kind of Channel 4, the Nickelodeon deals are still interesting. But at the same time, you can do your own thing and curate your own message to your own audience as well.
Definitely. Let's take some questions from the audience. We have 2 ways. First of all, our hashtag is StartupGrind. If you're tweeting out or taking some pictures, feel free to use it. You can log in to slido.com and use the hashtag SGL, and you come to this wall. And you can ask questions, you can vote for other people's questions. The question we have here for Emma and Michael: what advice would you give to your 20 years old self?
Oh my goodness me. You were definitely taking that one first.
Well, firstly, it wasn't so long ago, so come on.
You see, sadly, I can't say that.
Well, let me answer it this way. I think that the number one mistake that can be made, and I've been guilty of it with some of my businesses, and I think many people are guilty of it, is focusing on the money first. I think that focusing on the vision, I wrote several chapters about this in my book, focusing on the vision is absolutely critical with any business. And if you cannot explain to somebody very quickly what your vision is for a business, and if you don't know what the vision is for the business, and it's not, I'm not talking about some 5-year strategic plan with, I mean, like you asked me what the vision is for my business, and I should be able to explain it to you very clearly. And understanding that is critical in any business. The vision comes first, the monetization comes later.
Yeah.
Because if you've got a vision that you understand and that you can articulate, by definition, that really then should mean that you're fulfilling, or that should then translate to you're fulfilling some kind of need in the marketplace, or you're somehow fulfilling some need in the market, which then the third part of that equation is, okay, so we just wrap a business model around that later and make money from it. If you sit there, killing yourself with spreadsheets coming out of your ears and spreadsheets coming out of the printer for the rest of your life, and just focusing only on the money, I think that's, you may still do very well, but I think that if you look at most successful entrepreneurs in the world, be they famous or otherwise, it's the vision that they focus on.
So vision first, money later.
Comes later. And if the vision happens to fail and it doesn't make money, well, so be it. At least you had a good vision, as long as you didn't lose lose too much in the process. But at least you had a good vision, and you did something well for society. You contributed somehow. That's the critical thing, I think, in business.
Yes. Emma, what do you think?
So mine advice to my 20-year-old self would be, it takes longer than you think.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's a good one.
Okay, very nice. Let's take some questions from the audience. Physically, we have microphones here. So if you guys have any questions, raise your hand. David here. Let's take the microphone so we can hear it later on.
Thank you very much. David Stringle-Lamar, Fortis Consulting London, a founder, and I now know a rock star, so thank you very much for that. And also the chairman of the Institute of Directors, City of London, obviously a big supporter of entrepreneurship. You've mentioned lots of things about characteristics. That's my question. You've talked about UK fear of failure, USA not, Central Europe, natural entrepreneurs, creative skill sets. What do you both kind of consider to be the essential characteristics of being a successful entrepreneur, and is there any gender issues within those?
Ooh, okay. Are you happy for it?
Yeah, you take it.
And I'm sorry, girls in the audience, I don't think there's gender issues at all. I think regardless of your gender, anyone should be able to succeed in business. And it's funny, I had this question when we first launched Techlicate and had sold Techlicate. Somebody said, was it harder being a female? And I said, no, if anything, you stand out more, because in 2000, there weren't many girls launching .com companies. So I said, no, it went in your benefit. So there's sometimes slight gender imbalances when it comes to raising money, that girls tend to be a little bit more anti-risk. But success in business is for all genders. Characteristics of entrepreneurs, I have to say, the one I always put in front of everything else, just because I see it repeatedly, is hard work and huge commitment to what you're doing, which kind of links in back to what Michael was saying about the vision, that if you put your vision before the money, you're just going to work really hard to kind of see that vision through. So hard work, surrounding yourself with great people who are strong in the areas that you're not, and constantly being open to new opportunities. So kind of as you build the business, that you innovate, you're open to it, but you just keep going and have that dedication to it. So they'd be kind of my characteristics.
To me, I would have to say, passion and positivity, which is slightly more esoteric. But the reason I say those things is, firstly, most people who are wanting to start a business, it's something they haven't done before. It's a totally different paradigm. We've all, most things that we do every day, we've done them the same way the day before, the week before, very rarely. But starting a business is something that many people have never done before, and by far the majority of people can't relate to it. They don't have somebody in their family or friends who started a business. Obviously, this is getting less so, but it's a paradigm people can't relate to. So they become negative. Not negative because they're an unpleasant person, but negative because their mum's saying this is risky and get a real job and blah, 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 and why are you throwing everything away? And they're getting negativity and stress around them. Now, it's very easy to say, well, just be positive. Well, positivity, in my view, links in with passion. And if you're not, well, let's be positive. If you are totally committed and totally passionate about your vision, about what it is that you want to achieve, you'll push away when you're looking at the cash flow, when the creditors are calling you, when someone's, you know, on your doorstep, you know, harassing you because you haven't paid the bill, and when the bailiff's coming through the door, and all of these, whatever.
It's really hard to be positive at those points, Mike.
It's hard to be positive, but if you're obsessed that your vision, it's like your baby, your passionate about that vision, that has to get out into the world and that it has to succeed, because the world's going to be a better place thanks to what you're trying to do, and that nothing else matters, then you will rise above those things and keep going and keep going. And it's like an obsession. It's like it's not, you know, you're not. It's like having children. You know, some days, you know, they might keep you up all night and there's problems, but of course you still love them. It's the same thing with the business. You know, in spite of all the problems, if you're passionate about it, you will love it, and you know that will keep the positivity, and that will then allow you to rise above those difficult times and keep going. Because the reality is, most of the time, 99% of the times are difficult. It's you know, it's very rare. It's actually less so that you're going to get an amazing day or a big check in the mail. That's the fact.
Which is kind of amazing that we all do it, because it's. I agree with you on that. There's lots and lots of hard days, and we did an interview with a guy called Mike Suter, who was the founder of Stylist and Shortlist magazines. And somebody said to him, he's got a co-founder in his business, and somebody said, what did you do in the hard times? And his response, and I thought he's going to put off so many people starting a business, but he was absolutely right. He said, the thing is, when you're going through hell, you've just got to keep on going. And I was like, oh God, it sounds terrible. But this is the really interesting thing about entrepreneurship is, yes, every day there's, you know, are we bringing in enough money? Are these the right people to be running this business? Where does the growth come from? How do we expand? And all this kind of stuff. And yet, if you speak to any person who runs their business and say, right, would you give up all that tomorrow and go and get a day job? They would say, hell no, I'll stick with this. Yeah. So it's all about having that lovely control.
Interesting.
Totally.
We actually have Mike here in the audience. He's at the back. Hi, Mike.
Mike Southern.
Yes.
Hello, BHere entrepreneur.
Yeah. So we were just talking about you a while ago.
You've been very quiet.
Yeah. So Mike here. It's Mike actually for the audience. Mike is a very good moderator. He interviewed Richard Branson, for example, 4 times before. Not the last time, right? There's a few times coming, hopefully. So Mike in the audience. Emma, we have this question here on stage, which is on Slido. Linking to what we're talking about is, if you were to start a business today, how would you do it differently? And this is a question to both of you, yes. So.
Okay. What's Mike got to do with this, by the way? Are you pitching into this one?
No, you
I would buy Mike's book called The BHere Entrepreneur.
You mentioned Mike, so I just said Mike's in the audience.
Okay, sorry. How would I start? So I wouldn't start a business differently, and that's not meant to sound arrogant in any way. The way that I tend to start businesses, that if I would start a business again, which I'm not because I'm in this one for the long term, I would start on a budget. And this comes back to this money point of the person, I don't know who it was, who said, how do I go about raising 1.5 million for my startup? This is a very personal thing, and it doesn't work for everybody, but I am a huge believer in starting a business without borrowing money or raising money.
So bootstrapping.
Bootstrapping, because I think borrowing and raising at an early stage in a startup puts you in a very tenuous position, because you need to work out what the business is before you raise cash and give away any equity or get other people on board. You need to know where you're going. So the great thing about people starting businesses today is you can start a business on a budget. So our recent book was called Start a Business for 99 quid, including the cost of the book, which is $12.99. So you can set up a website by using a template website like Moonfruit or Wix or Weebly. You can start a business on Instagram, as we had a girl who came in to do a session for us the other day, who's starting a multi-1,000-pound business, and she's done it purely on Instagram, building up her following there. She sells out of these subscription boxes she does every Thursday. Incredible. So the technology means you can start on a budget. Another principle we hugely believe in is what we call working 5 to 9. So keeping hold of the day job, building your business at nights and weekends, so you keep the security of a salary whilst you're building confidence and cash flow in the business. So what not? Yes, Mike Southern.
Sorry, I was going to ask a question when you're ready. When you
No, I'm done. There you go. So bootstrap, bootstrap,
Do you have the
bootstrap,
microphone
bootstrap.
for Mike? Okay.
So it's a very simple question, because I always ask entrepreneurs this, which is, I'll ask both of you, so why is it you do what you do? Why specifically?
The way I would answer that question is that because I couldn't conceive doing anything else. Just going back to what we
That's
touched
a
on
passion,
before,
right?
what Emma touched on before, you know, it's an obsession, it's a compulsion, it's driven purely by passion, and every business that I do start, and every different branch that the businesses go into is generated totally by the passion for the vision of what that particular business is, and I just could not conceive doing anything else.
Yeah.
It's a total obsession.
Emma?
Similar with Enterprise Nation, and I did a breakfast session the other day, and the MC of that said, if you could start any other business, what would it be? Anyway, he said, I'm going to give you all time to think about that. And it came around to me at the end, and I said, so everybody else who were entrepreneurs had said, I don't know, so somebody who ran a meeting room business said, I'd love to start an outside kayaking company, and then somebody else who ran a software company said, I want to do trips to Honolulu. And it came around to me, and I said, I'm really sorry. I would start no other business because I am so super focused on this one. And the reason why I do it is because there's a job to be done. So with Enterprise Nation, with everything that we're doing at the moment, which is delivering business support to 5 million small businesses all across the UK and hopefully getting them into Slovakia and elsewhere,
Yeah.
there is a job to be done. Others are moving out of the market. We're sticking in the market. And therefore, this is why I do it.
Interesting. Okay.
So you just said people are moving out of the market. Who? Can you say who?
No, I'm not telling you that over this. I'll
okay.
tell you over
Oh,
a glass
okay.
of wine. Because you know who they are, so we'll do that one offline.
Oh, okay. Fine, yeah.
Okay, what I want to know, there's a question here, and Michael, it seems like you might be a good person to answer because you love investing and that's how you started. So do you think there is a startup bubble and do you expect to crash?
What I think is amazing that there seems to be a business that matches every need that we have as human beings. Very rarely do we get up in the morning and think, hey, I need to brush my teeth, and you go to the shops and there's no toothpaste company. I need to drive my car, there's a car company. I need to have a glass of water, there's a water company. There is a business and there is something matching every need that we have
There's
as
an app
human
for
beings,
that.
which is fascinating. There's probably an app for that, yeah. What's interesting though is, of course, then you've got the Steve Jobs of this world and the other peoples of this world who are taking existing businesses and phone businesses and making it better and better and better. So is there a bubble? Well, I think that with everything there's always going to be winners, losers, and some people who are more successful than others. There's no question about it. But I think that until such time as human beings, of course, our needs, our specific needs, without getting too philosophical, but our specific needs are pretty low, but our wants are almost, infinitesimal. We have infinite wants, and the more something is developed, we didn't need an iPhone. Nokias were perfectly fine. The phones over there on the wall, the old-fashioned phones, they were perfectly fine. But now we want them, and we want the phone 6 and 6 Plus, and blah blah blah, and it continues. So, whatever the branding. Hey?
They still look cool though.
Those phones look great, and it's a judge of your age as to how many of those phones. If you haven't seen those phones over there, go and see how many you remember. But so I think that that there will always be winners and losers. There will always be gyrations and movements in the marketplace. But if you're marketing your business right and you're fulfilling a particular need or doing a classic but with a spin or doing something better, you'll always find some clients, some customers.
That's a good answer. Emma, there's a question specifically for you here. And the question is, have you continued to work with Japan throughout your career? And if so, how?
Oh, did that question come from someone
Because
in
you
the
studied
audience?
Japanese, right?
Yeah, I did. Hi, so desu yo. I'm sorry if there's... Is there any... by the fact I did Americans, are there any Japanese?
That was my question.
Oh, bless you. So, sadly, we're not, or I'm not, so my language is terrible now. And we were talking the other day, so we're doing this trade mission to China this year, and a fashion designer wrote into us and said, if you ever do Japan, I'll be on the trade mission. So our head of events said, come on, Em, let's do Japan. And I said, we're not doing Japan until we take the market. Because I guess I would love to go back to Japan to help Japan encourage its own people to start businesses, but they're pretty good at doing it themselves. So I'm not doing so much over there. even though, again, I'm going to have to stop mentioning rival titles whilst we're in here. I don't know if you saw that it was a Japanese company that just bought the FT earlier this week. And the reason why I studied Japanese a long time ago with law is because they were making lots of acquisitions, their economy was doing really well, and it seems as if they're coming back and being a bit more acquisitive again now, a little bit more brazen, because they've literally, for kind of a decade plus, they've very much focused internally on the economy. They're starting to look up again. So as they start to look up and outwards, then hopefully we will do more business in Japan.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Let's take a few more questions from the audience with the microphone. There's a question over here. Just right here. And then we'll wrap it up.
Hi, Emma. You spoke a lot about co-founders as well, and I find that interesting as well because I'm a first-time entrepreneur, aspiring to be actually. And what tips would you give a first-timer in coming to a co-founding partnership, and what kind of things would you want to look for as well as structuring a relationship?
So great question. So I take it you don't have a co-founder at the moment, but you're looking for one.
I might potentially have one, but I am trying to figure out whether the relationship is the right one, and whether if it's not the right one, how I do go about.
So you're not sure yet?
So first of all, by the fact you're in a room with fellow entrepreneurs, what does your business do? Because your co-founder might be here. So what does it do?
It's a vision at the moment.
Yeah.
I haven't proceeded more on that, and it's something that I have a problem with as well. Every time I go on holiday, I put on about 2 stones, and when I come back, and I find it difficult to lose the weight. So my concept at the moment is having quite a boutique wellness retreat kind of a thing on a global basis, and give a selection of destinations for people to choose from, which are not exploited at the moment itself. So it's like trying to sort of develop a habit, like a lifestyle changing habit.
To lose weight?
Have a healthy holiday, but which could be fun, but when it comes to be...
the question is, what is
have
your
a
business?
healthy holiday. Well, even though you remind me of, we've got a brilliant woman who's coming to speak at an event for us in Bristol in October. She started this movement actually called Too Fat to Run, which I just love. She's called Julia Creffield, and you can probably guess from the title that people said to her, "You're too fat to run a marathon." She said, "I'm going to show you I can be fat and run a marathon." And she's now got this movement of women where she's helping girls who are big run. So what I would say, first of all, is kind of get it exactly right in terms of what that business is. When it comes to looking for a partner, a co-founder, find somebody who's got complementary skills to your own. So the best partnerships, in fact, we were just talking on the way in about central working. I don't know if there's anyone still here from central working. Is this the central working posse? Okay, well, there's a whole line there saying we're central working. So great business, which runs co-working facilities, London, Manchester, etc. And it's run by 2 guys, James Layfield and Steve Petty. And to me, they're the epitome of getting co-founders right. James Layfield is a media whore. You put a camera in front of him, and I don't mind that being said on camera actually, you put a camera in front of him and he's there. He'll do media, he'll be the front man, he's always out, he's in the magazines. What he could not do without in his business is Steve Petty, who is the little one behind the scenes doing this to make sure the production works. Steve Petty hates having his picture taken. Show me a magazine? No. Do a radio interview? No. Give that to James. I will make this business run. And the reason why those 2 are great is you've got the front man and you've got the man who's behind the scenes doing the production. So find the partner who's got the different skills to you. And the most important thing in any partnership is trust.
Yeah.
Because this thing is more important than your marriage partner. And as somebody said to me the other day, it can be a lot more expensive as well when it goes wrong. So find the person who is good at the things that you're not, make sure that that trust is there, and don't choose too soon. As my mum would say, darling, you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find your prince. So do a bit of that as well.
That's a very good advice.
Yeah.
Let's keep 2 last questions very short, please. We have one over here.
Jeff Thijssen. I chair the FinTech working group at Tech London Advocates, and I work with a number of accelerator programs. Yesterday I was at the copy of the global startup ecosystem ranking, and London was number 6.
Yes.
And last year was number 7. And it's phenomenal to see what has happened in London in the past couple of years. But what are your views on what London needs to do to further strengthen the whole startup and technology ecosystem?
Okay, one thing, get property prices right. Seriously, this city is out of space. Space is the major issue in this city. At whatever stage of business you're at, startups find it now too expensive in Tech City. To do pop-up shops, you can't do it now because you can't afford the business rates and all the space. Housing, you know, 70% of businesses that start a business from home. No one can find bloody affordable housing in this city. So the thing, and you know, London is amazing, and we're releasing a report on Thursday looking at enterprising regions, and every region wants to emulate London, because the beautiful thing about this city is you can sit in a coffee shop, you'll be on the tube, you'll be on a bus, you'll be somewhere, and absolutely within 3 people, someone is talking about their business plan, talking about their startup. So what we have here is volume. We have loads of advice. There are events every single night of the week. All of that is great. We've got positive media. What we don't have is space. So the one thing I'd love to see more of is, you know, great that News UK open up their space here, but shops to let small businesses in to sell, startups to get affordable space that they can move into, and houses for entrepreneurs to live in.
Okay. Michael, what's your answer?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those things, if it's achievable, so how that happens, I don't know. I think that, I mean, London, I'd be interested to see who exactly came out above London. But I mean, what more it can do, I think, if you look at what it is doing well to start with, one thing that London, this whole country, does do well, to answer the question in reverse and could do more of, is reinvent itself. And if you look at Britain, and I'm not British, of course, but if you look at over the last 1,000 years, this country was, you know, it controlled the whole world, this tiny little island. And considering, once again, that it's still a tiny little island with 60 million people, and it's coming in number 6, which is still no mean feat in the whole world in terms of the ecosystems, I think says that it is doing something right. And I think one of the things that it is doing right is reinventing itself and manage to inject this entrepreneurial flair, where you do find every third person, you know, wanting to have their own startup. And, you know, this is intangible, it's esoteric, it's something in the water. What is it exactly? I don't know. But, you know, it's a combination of things. It's a combination of things. Tech London advocates, startup grinds, enterprise nations. There's so many different factors. But whatever it is, it's working. And I think that fact, when you're looking at that, compared with other countries which are bigger, who are, you know, we are definitely punching above our weight here. That's why I've chosen to live here. And I think that in itself is something which needs to be bottled and harnessed, and certainly more of the same done, you know, times 1,000 to continue to make this one of the great hubs of entrepreneurialism globally, which it is.
Yeah, there is an interesting question here on Slido, and the question is, do you have any moral issues in working with Slovakia, considering their appalling anti-LGBT track record and laws?
What does LGBT mean? Forgive my ignorance.
Lesbian, gay,
Oh
bi,
shit,
transgender.
sorry. So I don't have any issues of working with Slovakia, because the reason why I think Michael and I are working in Slovakia is because we can see the entrepreneurial spirit of the country. We can see that there is a government there and a people there that want to do more with entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Why would anything stop you from doing business with the country? So no,
That's a good question. Okay, let's do a last question from the audience. So, do we have any questions? Last one over here.
Hi, I'm wondering, so how do you find the balance when you have a big vision and you're supposed to go out there and talk to people about it, still without giving away your biggest secrets? How do you do it effectively?
When you say without giving away your biggest secrets, would that secret be what the company's going to do?
I guess so, yes. I think that there's a lot of, myself included, entrepreneurs who go around thinking that they have a great idea.
Yep.
The fact of the matter is that it's probably out there, but you forget about it, and then you guard it as if it's your baby. And I think you should still go out there and talk about it, but how do you do it without still giving away too much and giving away everything that is maybe your unique selling point?
That's a good question.
So, yeah, no, it's a great question. So a couple of responses to it. One, there is legal forms of protection you can take called intellectual property protection, patents, trademarks, designs, copyright. So if you feel that anxious about it, go for some form of legal protection. But I have to say, I'm a big believer in an idea is worth nothing until you've executed on it. And the other thing about that is I genuinely feel that startups who've got an idea will execute it in a way that the business owner, the entrepreneur, has that vision for executing, which is therefore very difficult for somebody else to steal it. Because when you're starting your business, it's so much about you, the vision, which Michael's spoken about, how you will deliver that, your story, your brand, why you started the company, who you get around you in that company, and the kind of culture you create. It's really difficult for somebody else to say, I'm going to steal that off you, because it's so much of you invested in it. So my version is, as long as you're kind of in trusted company, talk to as many people as you can about your idea, but then very, very quickly get that idea into traction, make sales, write the business plan, get out there, promote it, etc. Because then you're building up the barriers to then anybody else being able to do anything
No,
with it.
that's a good answer.
I think you've got, I mean, obviously you have to use your gut feel and you have to use your intuition and your discernment about not talking about it. You have to use your gut feel, that's one. But I also believe that, I'm a big believer in actually the more that you do talk about something, hence, Emma asking this other lady earlier, your co-founder might be here. The more you do talk about something, the more it seems to happen. And the more, I talk, once I get to a particular threshold where my gut feel tells me I'm comfortable to talk about my business, the more I talk about it, things start to happen. Got to a particular threshold with Enterprise Slovakia, start talking about it. Suddenly Marion turns up in my life. Emma Jones says she wants to join venture. We've got ambassadors wanting to support the project. Things
Now he
start to
talks
happen.
about nothing else apart from
No, I
Enterprise
talk about nothing else.
Slovakia.
But if I was just sitting at home secretly guarding this, well, precisely nothing would have happened. It would be completely protected. Precisely nothing would have happened. And I think that if you look at the biggest, of course there's legal protection, totally agree. But if you look at some of the biggest businesses as we look out the window, look at coffee chains, look at airlines, look at oil companies, look at property companies. There's plenty of property out there. So, as you said, there's nothing completely new in terms of sector. Airlines, they're all pretty much the same, but yet they would argue to their death they're all very different.
Yeah.
We could say Costa, Starbucks, Nero, they're all the same, but they would argue to the death that they're different. So there probably is 1,000 people doing what you want to do in terms of the sector, but in terms of the way you're going to do it, and in terms of the people that you're going to attract around you and your spin on it, well, that's
Unique.
100 million% unique,
Yeah.
as unique as your own fingerprint.
Yeah.
So I think that apart from using your own intuition and legal protection where possible, talk about it carefully, but to people, and I think you'll be surprised how the right people will gravitate to you. And if they're not the right people, well, you'll realise it, and you don't talk to them again about it. But if they are, by this time next week, you could have 5 people who are going to help you take your business forward, and you could be amazed where that's going to take you.
Yeah. And on this note, please join